Today's episode of Poets at War is sponsored by the following.
I'm Ian Wilson, and I create graphic art using primarily traditional methods, supplementing with digital where it's needed. I use a real pen, a real paper, a real graphite to make my art. I like to feel my art. I've always been this way. I love the feeling of a pen or pencil in my hand, the sound of graphite scratching paper, and I love the sight of a nice black line making its way across the page. So why choose traditional art over digital? Traditional art has an organic, natural quality that seems to be missing from most digital illustrations. The illustrated books and comics that were made in the days before digital have an excellence and staying power that is just as vibrant now as it was decades ago. These are the stories that stay with you. Dr. Seuss, Winnie the Pooh, Where the Wild Things Are. People still read these. I'm currently working on my own graphic novel series, Legend of the Swordbearer, and I've also had the privilege to draw graphics for 2 motion comic series, along with illustrations for a small magazine, Logosophia magazine, and various book covers. Don't let traditional art fade into the dust. Help me keep it alive. You won't regret it. Visit my website at ianthomaswilson.com for more info.
He's a legendary music video creator, filmmaker, and now content maker, marketer, etc. He is the infamous, the famous, depending on who you ask, Darren Doane. We are not precious here on Poets at War. Let's Doane it!
Yeah, no, I just switched iPhones and like the other day, so all the calendar stuff is coming in, and so I knew we had something, but this is actually the way I like it, just hey, unless I'm out of town,
Right.
Pretty much I can make anything happen. So it's like this is, and this is so no, it's a perfect Friday. So I'll let you lead. Let's do this.
Okay. Well, this is one of those normal, just I record the conversation and then put it up kind of things. It's nothing particularly crazy, but have you listened to an episode yet or no? Probably not. You've been busy.
No, you got me one early on, and I thought it was really cool. I was actually really good. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I remember after we had talked, and so I usually try to go in and hear. Well, I like hearing what people are doing as well, because it reminds me that we're all still trying to figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
And I really like that, and I look at people podcasting now as like being in a band. Yeah. And so we're all kind of on the road, and we're meeting other bands that we're playing with at different clubs and venues. And no matter where somebody is at, there's always something to kind of steal.
Right. So
I really like that. Like, anyone doing this to me is like, okay, I'm going to steal something.
Right. Please.
I love it. So to me, it's really, that's what gets me the most just inspired, is just watching people say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to talk, and we'll see what happens.
Right. No, I totally hear that. It's been crazy, all the stuff that's been happening since Fight Laugh Feast. I know and don't know what you're involved with, because there's so many people doing so many things in Moscow, but like the lore guys with their beta launch has been absolutely insane. Yes. I'm excited about all of that stuff going on, and it's getting me excited. And I talked to my buddy Ian, who I've had on the podcast a bunch of times. Ian Wilson, you've probably seen his art on and around Facebook and Twitter and whatever else, but he's a great artist, and we had a conversation today. He loves everything that Laura and those guys are doing so much. He wants to go in full animated with some of my stories. And wow. I was trying to work on sort of this counter MS. It's supposed to be kind of like a retro thing, going back to like the MS-DOS look of animation.
Sure,
you know what I'm saying? And it was cool, but he really wants to go full on. I'm so like, okay, well, let's talk about it, and let's see where we can go. So there's just all kinds of crazy stuff going on. And like you said, it's that band feel to me. Like I know it drives some people nuts and other people love it, but that idea of just like the way you've always described it is Doane it. It's the guerrilla idea of just go and do and make. And that's one of the big things that I think you and I have had in common. You know, I was raised in mobile DJ business, right?
Okay.
And my father was a mobile DJ for years and years and years. And then I got into the business around 11, 12 years old, started doing elementary school jobs. And then we did so well with kids, and more kids were having parties than adults that it became a separate spin-off business. And we danced, they followed along, and we gave out prizes, you know, and stuff like that. And it was this big fun thing. And it was so word of mouth, on the move. You know, we had to make call audibles. These kids are a little bit, you know, more advanced. They need some of the harder dances, you know, versus these other kids, you know, whatever. And we had to make audibles to the playlist as it goes. And that's just the way I've always done my art, you know.
Look, it's real street level business, right? Which is, you have to adapt. Mm-hmm. You have to look at people and you have to see what's going on. Can you read a room? Can you understand kind of just what the feeling is, what the tension is, what the anticipation is? You know, that's just good street hustling on all levels.
Absolutely. And you know, one of the things you've done more recently that has been widely praised, and of course, you know, people go one way or another on it all around, is All My Friends Are Heretics, the new podcast. I'm wondering, I know some of the names that have been thrown out on Facebook and whatever else. I'm not asking for, like, you know, an answer, but are there any guys that we don't know about that have skinny branch sort of things that you're interested in having on the podcast?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I think Gary DeMar is the king of hidden skinny branches, you know, so and you have to take him seriously. And, you know, most people get worried about skinny branches because they think, like, let's phrase this.
Yeah, define skinny branches for the group and go into what all of the friends are heretics. Let's frame this whole thing.
Yeah. Because, you know, there's let's see. The first time I heard skinny branches was sort of, I think it probably had something to do with, you know, kind of second and third tier theology that kind of no one really cares about, but they kind of wonder if you keep going out on that branch, eventually it's going to break, and the skinny branch breaks, and then you fall off and you become a heretic, you know, or you sort of break with orthodoxy. Mm-hmm. And so that's usually why people say they're nervous of skinny branches, or skinny branches can be careful going out on that limb because no one's really done a lot of work on that, right? So they say, so it hasn't been pressurized. It hasn't built up into maybe a stronger branch, if we're going to kind of push this metaphor, you know. But usually people say this in the context of, well, it's not going to be orthodox, and if it's not orthodox, then you fall away or you become a liberal. And so I would reduce it to people are like, we're just afraid that if you're not a young earther, then you're a liberal.
Right.
Like that. And I understand why people do that. We've had connections, and you can see pattern recognition and stuff like that. You know, but you could clearly not be a young earther and not be a liberal.
Oh,
you could
absolutely.
Clearly,
my sister-in-law is one.
I think the jury's out on this. I don't know. You know, is it 10,000? Maybe it's 10,000 years. You know, like literally, what if, like, what I don't like personally, and thankfully no one should listen to me, but what I don't like personally is that the delta that the Christian community has set in regards to where you can't be, I just think are ridiculous. Like, now I am a young earther, but right. Like, I almost don't care.
Right.
Like, I don't care. It could be 10,000 years old. If it turns out it was 20, it literally does nothing to my faith.
Right, exactly.
Nothing is shattered.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if I was an old earther, nothing would affect anything in regards to what I do. But now the people that are unorthodox, the people that have fallen off, it almost always goes part and parcel with those other things as well.
Right.
So I understand the pattern recognition.
Right.
Right. But you'd be hard pressed to say someone like Gary DeMar, if he held that the earth was 20,000 years old and not 6,000 years old.
Right.
Gary's into, gay marriage now.
Right.
Like that's not going to happen. And now, look, I'm not saying ideas don't have consequences and theology and all that stuff, but so it really was sort of the inspiration between all my friends are heretics, meaning that everyone I know technically knows someone who thinks they're a heretic.
Right.
And if I was in control of the rules of heresy, everybody would probably be a heretic. Like, right. I personally find full on, like, free will, you choose God, there's no cosmic rape, you're born kind of 50-50, and you tug one way, and you have to, like, I find that an abomination.
Right.
Like, I find that, like, I'd be a full preterist way before I would be
right.
that.
Right.
Like, I find that so absolutely appalling. But here's the thing. We go, but we know so many sweet Christians who hold that. And they love Jesus.
Right.
And we literally give that that's a full pass.
Right.
But if you put 100 Reformed dudes in a room and you ask them, is that just insane heresy? Smoking cigars, they'd be like, yes.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. That undermines everything.
Right.
So now I'm not in charge, but the point being is that everyone's a heretic to somebody.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I think the heretic stick just kind of gets pulled out way too much. And as people have said, look, liberal scholars see things way better in the Bible than a lot of conservative scholars.
Right. Yes. They have a better big picture kind of lens going on.
Right. Because they have no skin in the game.
Right.
It's not going to get them kicked out of their denomination or their national convention. They can look at the Bible and go, that's weird. We've got a sea beast in Genesis and we've got a sea beast in Revelation.
Do you think that's why, at least in my experience, especially being in the South, I realize the South is a completely different culture than like where you were raised in California and when you became a Christian traveling in the various places you have. But like, I find conservative Christian, like politically conservative in various ways. And I'm not talking libertarian. I'm not talking Republican. I'm not talking anything in particular, but just Christian conservative artists tend to be the most attacked from every side, especially in a situation like in the South, because of the skinny branches, like we were talking. So like, the reason I brought this up is not even necessarily because of me, because I have my own whole thing about the rainbow that I go off on, saying that there's a metaphysical reason why not going for the rainbow and bringing it back from the people who have taken it and destroyed it is actually seriously important to our understanding of the Christian faith and what we believe about truth, beauty, and goodness.
Got it. Yeah.
But and I could go on about that forever. I'm trying to write a book eventually, but but my father-in-law, he has a whole different view on. He kind of gets into almost Nestorian sort of territory on certain things, because he has a very Greek understanding of logos and the idea that God cannot be man and man cannot be God. Therefore, Jesus can't be an incarnation, and then it turns into all kinds of crazy stuff, right? But I've never met a person who loves Jesus more than my father-in-law, and he really does know who he is. So it's like, where do we, I think the problem is not even where do we draw the line, it's why aren't we talking about these things, even on a lay level, It's a great question. Yeah, like I said, there are, but you're right. This back to kind of your first question about like, what are the skinny branches, right? They're all skinny branches, right? Like when you really start to talk about one category
of God, you immediately get on the skinny branches. And then if you love the Bible and you love reading it and you love digging into it, you live in this, it's all lived in the skinny branches.
Yep.
Because the wall of weird that is the Bible, and so when people talk about skinny branches, now I have friends that really respect that when they say I'm on the skinny branches, I listen, but most time it just gets thrown out there. And it's like, what do you mean? Like, Jacob wrestles with God and then God pops his hip. And from that day forward, the Israelites don't eat the meat around the hip bone. What is that?
Right.
And if you try to think about that or study that for more than an hour, you end up on these skinny branches because no one's done the work. And so it all just seems wobbly, right? But God did that.
Mm-hmm.
And which means there's a reason for it. And it means that when they don't eat the meat around the hip bone, it meant something. And by the way, whatever it meant, we don't even have the information to go along with it. And so we just skim over it. And
yeah, I was just going to say like the artist thing in me, being someone who is very story oriented and all these other kinds of things, I see connections in scripture that other people don't make,
Sure.
And the rainbow, one of the biggest ones, as just another example, is of course everyone immediately when you hear rainbow and Bible put in the same sentence, like you go to Genesis. Here's another place that is almost immediate in Genesis that no one ever thinks of, and that's Joseph, the coat of many colors.
Right.
That coat was Jacob, right? Placing his bet on his son to be the savior. Like the Bible's really clear on that. So,
and then do you cross over into any of the warbow stuff on rainbow?
I do.
And now you start talking about it's actually warbow, not rainbow.
Right.
And then now it's like, oh, you're weird. You're like, well, no, I'm actually just reading what's there.
Right.
And because I think, and then we get to Revelation and he's seeing through it, right? Doesn't Jesus look through?
Yep.
And
there's various points. And there's various points where the Revelation vision is not just in Revelation, but anywhere where Jesus is shown in his Revelation, second coming garb, it's either white robes or it's rainbow. Right. And that's like shimmering like a rainbow. And that's one of those things that like people take it and they try to mean it in their crazy way of love is love, everything just crazy chaos, which is one of the reasons I'm not a huge fan of tie-dye in general. Even though I have some, whatever, but like for colors, for me, the whole point of a spectrum of colors is that God is Lord over all of it. The red, the white, the blue, the black, et cetera, et cetera. And when we as Christians wear and tout the rainbow in ways like, to me, I was raised, I told you a while ago, Joe Morecraft, he has a thing against crosses, like some Reformed guys do. It's kind of the iconoclasm sort of a thing. And so, by the way, I'm glad you brought up this for a second, because that's what I mean by everyone's a heretic, because it turns out a lot of my Reformed brethren think that if I have a picture of Jesus, like, so this heresy thing, it cuts everywhere. Oh yeah. But the cross thing for him is it was used to kill my savior. Why are we using it as a symbol? It's and I don't blame him on that at all. I don't want to blame anyone's conscience on that. That's one of the reasons I'm not huge on crosses. But then I started thinking, especially as like a teenager, I'm sitting here going, well, then what symbol, rallying symbol, not even like a, because I was still in iconoclastic mode, not even in the image of Jesus kind of thing, whatever. But like, what rallying symbols do we have? And my mind went to the fish, which, okay, sure, whatever, but that seems really pulled out of nowhere in some ways, even though it was used in the early church. It doesn't seem to have a whole lot of resonance. God literally directly gave us the rainbow, not only as his promise to, save the Christians, but to not destroy the world again. This is literally the Christian promise to everybody. If there is an Arminian promise from Jesus, it is the rainbow, you know?
Well, but you know what? But it's funny. I also think that God is also telling a joke with the rainbow.
Okay.
Because let's think about what the promise is. What is the promise? This would be fun because you're the rainbow guy. Yeah. What's the promise given in the rainbow?
That he won't destroy the earth again.
Is it destroy the earth or flood the earth again?
See, that's the question that a lot of people have. To me, it's destroy the earth. And that's one of the reasons I believe that God will when it comes to complete, total global thermonuclear war, destruction, etc., this ties in with my postmillennialism, right?
Sure.
I don't believe that is actually possible. He will restrain the hearts of the wicked like he has, and we will be safe. So I believe that the rainbow actually is a promise in that regard too. Now, he can prove me wrong and it just be a flood. Like I'm fully aware of that. But I read it pretty clearly that this is, after and I didn't for a while, and Nate Wilson convinced me on one of his podcasts of the at least some form of spiritual Nephilim issue being one of the things that happened that caused the flood, right?
He'll definitely be on my podcast. He'll definitely be on my podcast at some point because all these guys need a beating on their Nephilim take. It's the worst. It's the absolute worst theological thinking, and I can't wait to take them all to town. But go ahead.
Well, let's go. But yeah, it's the thing. It's like the Seth thing I have an issue with. Some of what Nate says I have an issue with, but I believe that there was more spiritual stuff in high places going on, obviously, than just people being mean to each other, your VeggieTales slapping each other with fishes nonsense. Sure, you know what I mean? And so it's one of those things.
And now you're in Michael Heiser category, right?
Almost,
now you're in Unseen Realm, and Heiser, I think, Heiser is committed. He is sold out to it. I would love to get Heiser on my podcast. Again, because I love this stuff. I love fighting about it. Like that's back to the skinny branches. But here's the thing. I actually think it's a joke. I actually think it's a flood, but I think it's a flood that kills everybody. He said, I'm never going to flood the whole earth and drown everybody again. And again, I'm not dying on this hill, but for fun, I think it's a joke because he says, never again will I flood the earth and wipe out all mankind, right?
Right.
How does one get back into relationship with the Father?
I gotcha. Baptism. That's what you're saying, right?
I'm never going to flood the world and kill everybody again. But guess what? You want to have access
flood
to me?
And save everybody again. Yeah.
You got to go drown yourself and die.
Right.
To me, that is an unbelievably poetic narrative twist of like, and I got to tell you, I don't have a lot of original ideas. I steal them from everybody.
Right.
And I was on a plane. And I thought about that. And I was like, clearly somebody has thought of this, right?
Oh yeah. Well, there's a lot of flood stuff in general. It talks about in Hebrews, I think it's correct. I don't know for sure, but I think it talks about the that's one of my other big books is Hebrews, Types and Shadows, hero narrative, all that kind of stuff, right? Which is a whole other thing I get off on when it comes to the heretic stuff, right? But the point being that it talks about Pharaoh being drowned in the Red Sea. It talks about how
that's my point. Is that it's again, none of this is going to make me a liberal,
right?
So I don't lose anything in going, you know what? Yes, I guess demons do have sperm.
Right.
Now, that one I nod a little bit to because I actually think the ramifications of believing that, which is why I don't think anyone believes it, even when they hold to it, is because the ramifications those ramifications mess everything up. It messes the gospel up. It messes reality. It messes with the nature of reality. Right. Well, because you've got to tell me, how, well, if that view is true, if angelic creatures can impregnate humans, and that's what they say, happened, then that means we still have demon DNA floating throughout today. And now you have to tell me why it can't happen today.
Right.
So now you have to explain those two things. And by the way, nobody does.
Right.
They just say it stopped.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. But then you'd have to kind of get into an interesting form of preterism, which I'm fine with, because then you'd have to say somewhere at AD 70 or somewhere with the destruction of the temple, somewhere with the old covenant going away and being rolled up and all of that. Then there's a new cosmic Jesus is now in place where Satan was. They no longer have control. But those same people believe that demons are still messing with people today. So you still got to explain they can still mess with you. They're still demonic stuff, but they just can't have sex with your daughter anymore. Where does that come in?
Right.
Like, I don't see that. Like, so to me, they start with that premise. They can kind of make the case for it. I think even the way it's written, all of that, they leave me being thoughtful, and the way I'm thoughtful leads to something they say, yeah, but that just doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
Based on what?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I think it's fun to push people on that because I think they need to be pushed on it.
Well, I have an answer, but I want to move on to something else. So maybe
give me the quick answer.
I'll give you a quick answer. Yeah, sure. Okay. So quick answer is that I have, and I had the exact same things that you were saying for the longest time. And I'm not saying I fully figured it out. I'm in more of a agnostic, but something caused God to be that mad. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Sure. But we know of various places where men have touched, physically wrestled with, et cetera, angels that are in the forms of men.
Okay.
And I see nothing wrong with jumping from, and this is less the second question, like, why doesn't it happen today? I have less on that. I have very little on that, to the point where I don't even want to answer that because I have no clue. But this thing, I have no problem jumping from angels in physical human form because they can take that form, because that is a power God gave them, to having not only flesh and blood that you can touch, but sperm. Now, Is it real human? No, but they can make it act that way. You see what I'm saying? They can have real human, quote unquote, sweat drop off of them and it actually hydrate the ground.
Got it.
But that's part of their power, but it's not something that is of them. Hence why these abomination creatures were such an affront to God. You see what I'm saying?
Well, let's push it. I mean, I'm into it. I mean, I
if you got time, that's great.
You've got dragons on your shirt, so we can go like all day on this. I mean, so, which is fun. But so I'm not going to push. I want to ask. Let's just explore that. But do we think the sweat is demon sweat? Or how about this, angelic sweat? Right. Is it angelic sweat, or is it now DNA? Is it like human DNA sort of subset, meaning it's human DNA, but that DNA is not going to be connected per se? Let's say God,
or in a sense, are the demons in this case with the sperm genetically programming through essentially the idea of themselves, right? You see what I'm saying? Like, are they programming this into a separate human, as evil as they can make it, DNA?
Right. Because the skin, let's assume the skin is skin, right? Is it demon skin, or is it human skin that is allowed to form, right?
Right.
It's almost like you have a DNA copy center, right? Like, it's not connected per se,
right?
But it's real. But to me, that's where it would be interesting, because then the offspring, though, would have a DNA that's not related to anything. Now, I think this is what I mean by like skinny branches. Right.
That's
really what I love, because now here's how I would try to defend that view. I would say what we kind of have now categorically is the situation with Jesus, right? Like a mother, no father.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like what's happening, like, but even not a mother, right? The DNA is not them.
Right.
So we do have a category.
Yes, we do.
For DNA on the planet that's not connected.
Right.
So I think I do a better job at that. But all that to say, so I'm down with that. Like, I can create that category, because I'm open. When you're on the Skinny Branches, you're not afraid. You're not fighting for your identity.
Right.
Right. That to me is what I like about the Skinny Branches. And when they break, my point is when they break, sometimes they break, but I don't fall into
oblivion,
unorthodox views. I just, that one didn't hold any weight.
Right.
Right. You know what I mean? So that's still because now what you're doing is you're creating a subset nature of reality, which is conjured up down here in this realm.
Right.
And to me, that's a much more valid, fun category because that starts to deal with what we actually do see, and we do have to kind of wrestle with.
Yeah, let me say something to the people who will be listening. That one of the things that about this that is important for artists to be wrestling with these sorts of things is we absolutely live on the Skinny Branches with everything that we're writing, everything that we're creating, everything that we're doing, and we're trying to create connections even where there might not be some at times. And the fact is, if we're not comfortable doing this, we're not doing the job that God created us to do.
Right.
And so, but we need to obviously be careful, but like, this is the thing, people are being too careful in many cases. They're not pushing, they're not trying to find, what's going on. And that's sort of where we're at.
Which is why you can have a culture totally confused, including Christians, on the idea of people transitioning.
Yep.
Right. See, now we thought this was all just kooky conversation stuff until we woke up one day and the conversation was kooky.
And they built a whole theology around their, Right.
And it's like, now Bruce Jenner's a commentator on Fox News. Yeah. Like, you're like, right. You're like, oh, wait. So this got like, no. We just, and I know Christians that are like, we're even saying like, well, I guess I would have voted for him in California because he's a conservative.
Now, I got to tell you this is a concept that is Skinny Branches, that is in one of my stories. It's actually the one that we're working on for animated stuff right now. I wasn't planning on bringing this up, but it just really fits into what we're talking about. And I warn you, it might land me as one of the unknown guests on all my friends are heretics at some point.
Well, so then what's your heretical Skinny Branch take?
Okay, so starting with, as most heresies do, scripture in one way or another, the life is in the blood. You're familiar with the verses that say that. The life is in the blood. Okay, so I wanted to create a science fiction concept around that. And my first real inkling of wanting to do that was from the Terry Schiavo case back in the early 2000s. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got this lady. She's, basically what medically brain dead is what they say. She does interact with people on a small level, but they've been keeping her alive. And her husband says, when she was alive, she didn't want to be kept alive when she was brain dead, so it's time to let her go. And because he was in charge of her medically, the courts upheld his right over her, and she had her plug pulled. And she passed away. Well, I was in Atlanta, and this was a very formative thing for me. I was in Atlanta during when the federal court case came to Atlanta, protesting on the street with my family. And we were there. We were the only Presbyterian group, me and my cousins and my family, amongst a bunch of Catholics and like one or two Baptists. Right. And so it was a small group. It was middle of the night when they were actually doing this thing, which was crazy. Like, they were meeting really late. And I was getting interviewed by people on the news, what's your position? What's your take? And I had to tell them, regardless of whether or not this whole situation, is the case, no one but Christ can take someone, like that's not her life. It's not his life to do with what they please, and I had to go through all that. But the thing that really stuck out to me is, what if you had a husband and wife in the future, far-flung future, right? And there's a war, and they both end up in the crossfire, and the wife is shot and killed. at least as far as we can understand medically, right? But here's the thing. Both of them are involved in what is called illegal tech repair. This falls into another thing I wanted to explore in science fiction, which is the right to repair thing, right? Basically, you got a world where obsolete tech is considered illegal because it's dangerous and the government's looking out for you, right? And so there's this black market where they fix old, outdated tech. You following me? So what he does, he's so good at his job and so good at his tech that he panics as his wife is dying, and he takes her into their work shed and he opens her up and he tries to save her heart and her brain. He loses the brain. He's able to save the heart. In his grief and in his grieving process, he begins to use an illegal technology called vampiric technology, where blood actually fuels the machine. To rebuild his wife as a vampiric android and replaces her personality as best he can with his memory of how she was, as accurately as possible. Androids are illegal, vampiric technology is illegal, and he does this anyway, and he renames her so it's not necessarily an issue if people find out she died or whatever, and just kind of acts like they're common law married.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. So my whole point in going after that is the life is in the blood, and he doesn't realize it, and he's confused by it, and he struggles with it, but his wife is really still there.
Yeah.
So that's some skinny branches.
Well, but you could back that up and say it's skinny branches, but it's what is a person?
Right.
Right. So if I lose my arm,
a
car accident, am I still me?
Right. Ship of Theseus.
Right.
Yep.
So how much of me do you get to get rid of before I stop being me?
Yep.
Right. And eventually you do end up at the heart and the mind, right? In the brain. And that starts to hurt for people to think about because they've never had to think about it. And of course, the emotional response that comes with it, now it's Johnny got his gun. It's, laying there, as chest and head, can't communicate. You're blind, deaf. It's a nightmare scenario.
Right.
And nightmare scenarios are not things that people want to think through. And it's understandable.
Right.
So you take your story, it's connected to things that people already haven't even thought about, which we do have to think about. We do have to think about people coming back from war, losing all these limbs, being blind, being deaf.
Not having anything but a brainstem. There's a lot of people like that,
Right. And so because we don't even want to think about that, it's going to be impossible to think about your story, right? Without being very like, well, wait, that's just, you got to get tech, you got to get these things. But, we're getting there now. And just the idea of, again, what is a person and how much can you start attaching? Because we're going to have limbs, we're going to have all that stuff. The next 20, 30 years are going to be an amazing adaptation.
Yep.
And of course, that's going to freak people out. But if you haven't thought through breast implants, if you haven't thought through, nose jobs, if you haven't thought through, LASIK surgery, if you haven't thought through all these things they're already here, right? Understanding then what is going on and where we're going is, again, you jump to a story like that and it just seems so sci-fi, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But you look at Neuralink and what Elon Musk is doing and what that's possibly going to start to do, and the idea that basically everything can be cured through your brain because everything is electricity.
Right, and not to jump on Marcus Pittman's bandwagon in many cases, but this is why the church needs to wake up and have some kind of understanding or theology. That's why we need to get into the skinny branches on these kind of issues and actually have men who've been elected to office the right way, who've been ordained, saying what's the deal on all this stuff.
Yeah, men who have actually thought about these things. It's not a shock. Like you tell me the story, I have a reference point. I'm not like, what?
Right.
Oh my! It's like, well, okay, well, hold on. And people have thought through this stuff and elements of it. And so I think that's cool. I mean, I think that's what then the job is to then responsibly help people think through these things and what does that mean,
right?
You know,
and that's something only storytellers can do many times. Yeah,
right. Now, whether life is in the blood and those sorts of things, I mean, again, I like that because because I'm well,
you're Presbyterian for one.
Well, yeah, but I've never called myself a Presbyterian. It just sounds too gay.
Right, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
You know, but I don't even know if I would count as Presbyterian. I always tell people, well, give me the Presbyterian test, and I'll tell you if I
right. What I'm saying specifically though is you would have no problem with a person who is mentally retarded being baptized.
100%. Right. Exactly.
Right. Exactly. Like this is also the question.
But by the way, every Calvary Chapel, Southern California Baptist Church, they baptize them all the time too.
Right.
I think they do it for a different reason.
Right.
You know. But here's the thing. Life is in the blood, to me, really cashes out more with martyrs, even to this day. There seems to be, like, even Iran knows if they start killing Christians, not just letting them rot and die in the jails, that's different.
Right.
If they shit, because they don't bleed them out in Iran.
Right.
They just imprison them.
Yep.
Even they know if the blood hits the ground, something happens.
Yep.
And so the life in the blood, I would think some may also have an aspect of not so much the person's life, maybe, although I think that's there. To me, something about life is in the blood is life is life.
Yes. Energy, existence. Yeah. All that sort of stuff. Yeah.
And when you murder that, right? How the Avenger of Blood works, which, by the way, let's talk about that character that we didn't just make up.
Yep.
Right? The Avenger of Blood? Like, what comic book are you reading?
Right. For real.
So that, again, it opens up all those, you know, it to me, that's where you have to get on the skinny branches, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We're getting close to the end of our time. Is there anything else that you want to
do a round two today?
I'm down with round two. What's
your day like today?
I don't have a whole lot. I got brothers in town that are going to be here for the whole weekend. They knew I was going to be podcasting, so it's going to be as long as I want.
Why don't we do a part two? Why don't we do a part two? Let's just book that even next week or something. Let's do like a 2 or 3 part skinny branches.
Yeah, sure. By all means.
Because like I said, I think we're just getting started. So let's keep having some fun. So let's book another one.
Okay.
And let's do let's do 2 more of these and let's see if you can find some fun things for us to go out on the branches with. Yeah, man.
I will get with you on that. I can do that now, or I can get on with you on it later. The one other thing I was going to say was, I definitely still want to talk about some of the other, artist related stuff. And the other thing I wanted to say before we go is I was just talking with my artist and I said, and he agreed with what I said. I said, I am both the weirdest and simultaneously most orthodox guy you're gonna know, and I love people who can hold those two things together. There were people like Rich Mullins who had some other weird stuff that I disagree with, but he held his orthodoxy in many ways with his with his weirdness, and it's just one of those things that I want to get into that more specifically. Yeah. So we'll put a pin in that for another time.
Let's dabble.
Yeah, absolutely. And see where it goes. But I guess I'll do a little send off and then we can either plan that out or say goodbye. So everyone, remember, this is Poets at Ward. Be your family's bard. Do not turn to the right or to the left, and God will follow you wherever you go. And yeah, we'll see you next time in the trenches on Poets at War.
God of song, said the warrior bard, though all the world betray thee, one sword at least thy right shall guard, one faithful harp shall pray.